Hi everyone.
Hello again.
We're in the Pure Worship book. We're on page 130 at the subheading, How did Jehovah collect them together? But we're going to concentrate on page 131 where they have a picture of two sticks.
Two pictures, really, right?
Yeah, two sticks just on a piece of, on the ground, and then they have two sticks in somebody's hand. And then they have a few comments here that we thought we should read and look at.
And I'm going to be reading from my screen, whereas Vivian's got the book, so I'm going to be staring over your heads.
So, the joining of two sticks is the heading. And then they have, Ezekiel is instructed by Jehovah to write on one stick for Judah, and on another stick for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim. And then under that, they have the phrase, for Judah, ancient times, two-tribe kingdom of Judah, modern times, the anointed. And what they mean by the anointed here is us, like our day, Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witness leaders.
Yeah, not us.
Not us, that's for sure.
Yeah, they wouldn't think that. Then they've got, for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, ancient times, 10-tribe kingdom of Israel, and below that, modern times, the other sheep. Now, you wouldn't know that you would get that from Ezekiel if you were reading that.
So what they've got to say about the uniting?
Yeah, so then they have underneath, they become just one stick in your hand. Ancient times, 537 BCE, true worshippers return from the nations, rebuild Jerusalem, and worship as one nation. Modern times, since 1919, God's people are gradually reorganized and united to serve as one flock. Then under that, becoming united is the focus. The prophecy does not describe one stick that is first torn in two and then later brought together as one. Rather, it describes two sticks that become united as one. Hence, the prophecy did not focus on how the nation of Israel became divided into two kingdoms. Rather, it focused on how the two kingdoms would become one.
So what's the problem?
A lot of problems here. I couldn't believe this. So first of all, they're obsessed with themselves. You're reading the book of Ezekiel about Israel, and you're thinking, this has to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
This is fulfilled in me. They're obsessed with themselves. They find themselves everywhere.
So in the old days, when they had types, before they abandoned typology just in recent years, at least they could say, well, spiritual Israel is the antitype of fleshly Israel.
Yeah,
but they can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So what are they doing here? They're just arbitrarily telling you
the same thing.
Judah and Benjamin here, the two tribes, are somehow picturing the anointed. Is that right? The anointed.
Yeah, but they seem to be trying to avoid the word type by saying described, pictured maybe. I don't know, did they say pictured? They said described.
Described.
Anyways.
So what is the reasoning behind all of this? It's not even consistent anymore. At least in the old days when they had types, they could say, well, Israel, the fleshly nation, is a type of spiritual Israel. That's our anointed. But now you're saying Israel, which is the whole thing. All of these sticks represent Israel and Judah. That's
both
Israel
the two tribes
in its totality. So it's not even the type of Israel being the anointed that they used to have, and the other sheep somehow being everybody else except Israel.
Yeah. So now even the 10 tribes are the other sheep, which are supposed to be of the flock. So that doesn't make any sense, because you've already said, if you don't want to make yourself a type of Israel as a witness, because they're unfaithful according to you, and God has thrown them over for you.
Well, that's when it wouldn't have worked, but even before, in the old types days, the literal Israel was an unfaithful nation that was shown mercy by God.
Yeah.
you think you're a faithful nation that is shown favor by God. That's not a type.
Yeah.
So how is it a prediction then of you? Because what you have here, if you have anything at all in Ezekiel 37, in this vision of the two sticks, which ends with them in the land with a tabernacle, God's tabernacle among them, and the King David serving as their ruler, their shepherd.
Yeah.
How is that fitting your picture as a Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah.
And they're going to tell us that in the next
Yeah.
section. They're going to tell us, well, that somehow has something to do with Jesus invisibly being present from 1914 onwards. But
Yeah.
that's not the terms of Ezekiel 37.
Yeah, so it's arbitrary. They just make it up and make it apply to themselves.
Now, what we're speculating on here, and I admit this is speculation, but it's based on their own history, this speculation.
Yeah.
Now, what are they going to do? Are they setting up to move another date?
Yeah, I think first you have to say, when we were leaving, we said they're going to change something about 1914. We said that back then when we
35 years ago.
Yeah, when we were leaving. And they did eventually make changes, right? And then now it looks like there's some saying they're going to drop it. Now, why is 1914 so important? Because your 1919 is attached to it. If you ditch 1914, what are you going to do about 1919? Because, you've got God looking at what was happening and choosing you at that time.
Well,
So they're tied together.
They are intimately tied together, and you'll notice the focus in these last couple of chapters really has been on 1919.
Mm-hmm.
Are they setting up, though, now that they've abandoned the generation teaching, are they setting up for also abandoning 1914? In which case, are they going to move the date or just abandon date setting altogether? Well, their history is always tied to date setting.
Yeah,
So
I think they move the date.
Again, based on what we do know from reading even recent history, for instance, what Ray France tells us in the Crisis of Conscience book, is that even at the governing body level in the late 1970s, after the 1975 disappointment, several governing body members were already entertaining the thought of shifting. They've been embarrassed by their 6,000 year calculation in 1975.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're talking about moving the 1914 one even before the generation runs out.
Yeah.
And Schroeder and at least one or two others are entertaining the thought of 1957, maybe the signs in the heavens, Sputnik, etc., the age of space.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the sign of that we're now in the last days. So they're already thinking in terms of the 1950s as being. Mm-hmm. Now we're looking at the FDS, of course, and in even the years since this book came out, the FDS is now firmly entrenched as the faithful and discreet slave and as the governing body.
They're both. Now.
But when did it become the governing body?
Yeah, they only
recently.
Yeah,
but when did the phrase governing body take hold?
In 72.
Yeah.
Right?
So are they thinking of moving the chronology to the 1970s?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, taking the anchor from 1914 and repositioning it at the end of the 6,000 years. Are they going to move the 6,000 years again? Because we know they've changed the time of the end before, from 1799 to 1914. They've also changed the 6,000 years from the original calculation, which was 1872, 1873. Then they moved it to 1972 in the early 1940s in the Nort era.
Yeah.
And then they moved it to 75 in the 60s. So I think with them, anything is possible. With the governing body, all things are possible. That's why I found the first sentence in the next paragraph
ironic,
ironic.
Because they use the scripture about with God all things are possible, but really, in this case, with governing body all things are possible. They can change arbitrarily whatever they want. Even the expression governing body, which was kind of introduced to us in 72, they try and rewrite that back into their past.
Yes,
as if they've always had a governing body, but before that they were a corporation.
A corporation with president, vice president. In my day even, they were still referred to as President Nor, Vice President France.
So they shift
that terminology
from that.
is gone.
Yeah, they shift from that to make it sound more biblical.
Well,
because when we left and I started looking at the history, it did kind of bother me, this corporate language.
Mm-hmm.
So they had already shifted from that. But yeah, when I was younger and when you first were a witness, it was just a year before they brought in the governing body for you.
That's right. So I got used to the corporate designations. But now that they're God's organization, which is still a corporate way of thinking about yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now that the governing body are no longer referred to as president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, they're just the governing body. They are also the faithful, discreet slave. They've already proved that they can do that.
Yeah.
So the anchor now is not even 1914. The anchor is their own authority as the governing body, which does fuel the thought that, well, they could now move the date into the 70s and attach it somehow to a readjusted 6,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another possibility, which is some have suggested that what if they don't abandon the Gentile times idea, but they do release it from 1914? In other words, they hang on to the 7 times idea, the 2,520 years, but they start it from the accurate date, the real date. The new light might be that we now know that the date of Jerusalem's fall was 586 or 587.
I think that would be a hard one to sell. Well, maybe not, because you got a lot of new people.
With the governing body,
But
all things are possible, you said.
It would seem outrageous to any of the old timers, because we've been so insistent. We're the only ones that know this.
They got away with it before. They got away with it in Russell's day.
It is true. It's possible.
And this particular bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses today seem to be particularly
dependent,
gullible,
yeah,
and paranoid about anything, any other possibility.
and just following
sheep.
Yeah.
So I would say, it would be very risky to pick up anchor and re-anchor into the 1970s. But hey, they've done it before,
here, and they've got a new crowd.
Yeah.
So they can make these shifts, and some of the people won't even know that there's been a shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not encouraged at all, as we were, because we had history books in those days.
Yeah.
Before the Proclaimer's book, we had a history book. We're not encouraged at all nowadays to look at our past.
Yeah. But I would encourage you, just look at Ezekiel and don't think what the Watchtower is making of this. What does the text say? Who's it talking about? And believe it.
Well, they're going to explain some more from Ezekiel 37, and I'm looking forward to that discussion too.
Okay.
What's our link?
We're linking to a video called Kingdom Arrived in 1878, Armageddon Ends in 1914, The Discreet Slave is Certain of God's Dates. Go back to the past. They've been just as certain in the past.
See you next time.
Mm-hmm.